All right. Now we can get to my main man, Delano Squires, get a little smarter with this conversation. Delano has written a column today that I think has synergy with what I was talking about today as it relates to Caitlin Clark. Delano has written this. Delano's column is a little bit personal for me just because he's writing about William C. Rhoden, longtime sports columnist, was with the New York Times for a long time. He now writes for ESPN's website called Anscape that used to be The Undefeated. He's writing about the transgender issue as it relates to women's college basketball. William Rhoden's most known for writing a book called $40 Million Slaves. Delano describes a man who has turned into the $40,000 rainbow overseer. Delano, unpack your column and what William Rhoden is talking about, and then you and I are going to dive into this.
Sure. So, Jason, when I saw the column on Anscape, it talked about Title IX and how, quote unquote, trans athletes, which always means men who think they are women, how those athletes are going to be, accommodated in college basketball. And from the beginning, you could tell that, William Rhoden is taking a sympathetic stance on this particular issue. So he talks to Kim Mulkey, he talks to Dawn Staley, he talks to the coach at Virginia Tech, Coach Brooks. And it is clear from reading this that everyone involved in this piece, particularly the adults, are completely scared of offending the trans lobby, right? Of offending the Pride Power movement. And my piece basically makes the point that William Rhoden, a man who, as you said, is most famous for writing about $40 million slaves and arguing that black athletes have sort of lost their revolutionary streak because they've been handcuffed by all the money that they've amassed. He now is the official scribe of the Rainbow Brigade. And he picks up his pen, puts his hand to the plow every day without question, while being watched by overseers at ESPN, Rainbow Whip in hand. And while he is past his prime, the primary role that William Rhoden and men like him, Kevin Blackistone, to a lesser extent Mike Wilbon, the primary role that they play in today's social landscape is to keep other men like them in line. And I made the point, they are so well trained, Jason, that they will go after a free man and make him think that he's a slave. So when Tony Dungy says, he supports biblical sexual ethics, marriage between one man, one woman, biblical definitions of man and woman, his pro-life sort of advocacy. Here comes Kevin Blackistone, right? Right to the plow. Tony Dungy is basically a white supremacist and, and a racist and a bigot. And then in jumps Dr. Harry Edwards, again, another man, faux revolutionary, right, who might have been radical in the 60s, but now he's part of the status quo. And he's calling Tony Dungy a bigot. So my entire point is that entire generation of men have been defanged. There is nothing in them that's revolutionary anymore. And that's because the revolution has been corporatized. And Bill Rhoden, Harry Edwards, Kevin Blackistone, and the people like them and the journalists that come underneath them, the Jamel Hills, the Bomani Joneses, the Ryan Clarks, have no problem saying Donald Trump is a racist, have no problem criticizing, any white player who they feel has made a racial microaggression. But if you ask them to define the word woman or to comment on whether men should be in women's sports, then it's going to be fumbling and stumbling and tiptoeing all around. So, I say this as someone who I respect my elders and I respect people who've come before me. But if you're going to paint yourself as a revolutionary, as someone who speaks truth to power, then I'm going to need you to at least be able to say that a man is not a woman and a woman is not a man. And here's where I end. And you know this, Jason. A lot of black folk get online, talk about what they would have done if they was in the civil rights movement. Man, if the police put them dogs on me, I ain't finna take that. I'll be out in the streets and I'll be doing this and I'll burn it down. But it's hard for me to think that someone would have stood against the color line in 1963 when they can't even affirm the sex binary in 2023. And that's where all of these people find themselves.
So you just rattled off names of guys that I know them all. I mean, and these are my peers. These are people, many of them I used to be close with. I once, when Bill Rhoden had the book out, $40 Million Slave, I introduced him in Kansas City when he hosted a book signing there and a conversation. And I think I hosted that conversation, was the moderator of that conversation. Bill is someone I've known many, many years. Same with Kevin Blackistone. You threw Mike Wilbon in there, someone that I certainly greatly respect. And I'm just like, man. And obviously, at one time I had a relationship with Jamel Hill and had a relationship with Bomani Jones. And what is fascinating, where I think the synergy in what we're talking about is what has blown my mind away is how supportive they all are on this LGBTQ plus IA silent P transgender deal. It's like that is their master, and it's our master. As and I'm not talking about me and you. I'm just talking about us as black people. This racial dynamic is like a little fake war that we're out here fighting the race war. It's the 1960s, and that's what Bill Rhoden's really about. And what you are exposing is like, no, what he's really fighting is the transgender war. Look at this column. He's endorsing this without any shame. He knows that's his job. And you have every right to question whether, like, does he really believe this? The Bill Rhoden I was reading in the 90s and 2000s, was he really just an alphabet soldier in hiding that whole time? Or is he doing this because they've told him to do this and he has no choice? And if that is the case, quit pretending that you're a revolutionary. You're just a hired mercenary in the alphabet war.
Absolutely. And to be fair, I'm not going to assume how anyone lives their personal life, because I don't know these people personally. I don't know what people do in the sort of the privacy of their own home. But here's what I do know. The last thing that someone who has built their identity on oppression wants to be seen as the oppressor of someone else. And the Pride Power movement understands this very well. So not only have they hijacked the language of the civil rights movement, they have taken the rhetoric and basically turned it around on black folk and are using it like a weapon, and are holding people like Bill Rhoden and all the other people that I'm talking about. They're holding them at gunpoint, and it's not just him, because I talk about in the piece when he asked the LSU coach and then Dawn Staley about their views on this topic, and kudos to him for at least asking it, because most people don't even want to touch it. Both of them started out by saying, well, I want to be sensitive. I don't want to offend anybody. Now, these are women who hyper-competitive, top of their game, last two national champions, right, have built a career, I'm sure they would say, fighting against the patriarchy, fighting to have women included, fighting for Title IX, Kim Mulkey fighting against sexism, Dawn Staley fighting against the intersection of sexism and racism. And Bill Rhoden asked them, hey, do you think we should make Joanna Man turn it from a comedy into a docudrama? And they, well, I don't want to say anything. So what's clear to me, if this is to your point, is that one phobia beats two isms. That's the way the hand gets dealt nowadays. And these women who will say that they've been fighting sexism and sexism plus racism have been backed into the corner for fear of being called transphobic and bigoted. And as I've said before, in other appearances, the most powerful and influential women in America oftentimes feminists of one stripe or another have finally found a group of men they're willing to submit to. Because it's easy for Dawn Staley to take a stance about, against playing at BYU, because that's a university in Utah, is 80% white, 95% Mormon. It's easy for her to take that stance and play, woman king of the NC women's college basketball. It's easy for her to do that. But when you ask her, hey, if LeBron James or if Bronny James all of a sudden say, you know what, competition's a little tight, on the men's circuit, I'm going to identify a la Zaya Wade for the next 2 years as a woman, and I'm going to go and play college basketball. If you ask her whether that's a good thing, she's moonwalking like Michael Jackson. So I don't listen to any of these people who beat their chest and talk about how brave they are, how revolutionary they are, or any of this other nonsense. If you cannot speak timeless truth, because, Jason, this is not even about, same-sex mirage. This is not about whether two men or two women should be able to get married. This is about affirming truth. If you cannot do that, if you are too scared or too ignorant to do that, you should not be in a position of leadership, because cowards make terrible leaders. Because all that stands between you and selling out everyone and everything everyone and everything you believe in is having the political pressure turned up high enough. And that's what you're seeing now. So that's what I'm saying. All these chirpy women and the dudes that, think that they were Colin Kaepernick back in the day. They had the full-length leather. They had the dashiki. They had the fists in the air. They're toothless. Because when them overseers at ESPN start cracking that rainbow whip, they say, oh, man, we loved Tony Dungy 10 years ago. He was an icon. He was a trendsetter. He was a barrier breaker. But now he's a bigot and a white supremacist. Please.
Like what you saw? Hit that like button, subscribe, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.